Hey guys, um, we just finished a show today, and I did not want to end the show in any kind of really sad situation. Um but this is the 23rd anniversary of the day that started a lot of what we are dealing with now and what we will be dealing with for the next maybe 20 years. God, I hope not. But in summation, 9/11 was an Israeli American plot conspired by different little factions within the American government, as well as Israeli sympathizers, dual citizens within the United States. Funding and plotted by the CIA, numerous tentacles within other countries, PNAC starting the actual first tentacle of it. And PNAC was a group of psychopaths that Gore was meant to lose the 2000 election, even though he won the popular vote. Then the recount happened with Bush because they had already knew what was going to take place, since they were already putting in certain um, places like the urban moving system vans that were not a real company, and it was actually a shell company, but those were the vans that were stopped at the George Washington Bridge on 9/11, and in which they found five Israelis who were saying that, it's our problems are the same as your problems. It's the Palestinians that they're a problem, and all this crazy shit. I guess he didn't know that Plan A didn't work out as such. And so, after losing the election and the Bush bros got in, uh, that put the puppet in place to push for the Saudi Arabian Israeli interests. 9/11 was supplied by the complicity and mutual benefits of destroying WTC 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, as Larry Silverstein, the owner of buildings 1, 2, 7, and I think more, um, received billions of dollars along with a phony war that managed to kill and send 1 million Iraqis to their graves and thousands of Americans. And 22 people a day were dying at home by suicide from the actual experiences they had, from the horrors of murdering 1 million Iraqis, mostly civilians and children. They took up arms against Oman, Syria, Iraq, and Iran, as waves of cancer have killed tens of thousands of people since that very day. Up to this point, not only was it 343 firefighters that had died, but thousands more along the way, and there will continue to be more along the way. The number is closer to 40,000 people that died simply from the cancers of that day. The carcinogens that were in the air were a absolute health risk, and the EPA knew it was not breathable, it was not safe, and Christine Todd Whitman had lied to the American people and sent hundreds of tens of thousands of people to their grave, whether they knew it or not, all to open up Wall Street the very day after. These people that did this like I said, were Israeli and American dual citizens. They're at the highest upper echelons of our government, and yet have more of a duty and honor to their home country than they will ever have for ours. So, as a conflict of interest, how is it possible to have people like Zelikow be in charge of American policies? How can you have so many dual citizens in the highest points of our government? That means your loyalties are split. And our American government should be an American government. Now, of course, 9/11 was not the fault of Donald Trump. Donald Trump had nothing to do with it. But my point is that it's people like that that keep secrets and continue to live in lies while MBS has him in his pocket. Now, let's remember that all of the quote unquote hijackers were Saudi Arabians. The fact that we found out that more than 10 of them were still either alive and well, one of them had died a year before on 9/11 in 2000. So the fact that they never changed those faces is highly suspicious and gives it all away. The fact that they have never once changed their names and updated them to be more proper. No, they're still there. Those people are still alive in that photo of the 19 hijackers. So there was a woman by the name of, I believe her name was Kimberly, and she was the woman that gave these gentlemen fake IDs. She worked for the DMV. And so one of her coworkers enticed her into selling them fake IDs, and that's where they got them from. Now, she was caught and was sentenced to an actual trial, and the day before her actual trial date, she was found so severely burned in her car that her arms fell off. The very same car that was sold to her by her coworker, one of these so-called Saudi Arabians. So, losing all of these facts, you'd still have to deal with the very physics of the event. Asymmetrical damage can never lead to a global collapse. Asymmetrical damage will cause an asymmetrical downfall. So what that means is buildings don't fall into their own footprint and into the basements unless it's controlled demolition. And 9/11 was 100% a controlled demolition. It has been proven by the actual chips within the dust, and it's traced back to the very same American government. The international court system wants a real investigation of 9/11 because it was not just Americans that died that day, but it was also other countrymen. The country of Italy wanted to personally have something to do with the investigation where they would have their own people and their own experts come over and perform the investigation that America never did and never did properly. It's one thing to say that there were no explosives found in the rubble, but it's an entirely another thing to say that you didn't even look for them. We were told that what you saw was, dust from the burnt, from all the burnt paper and stuff. But we saw the paper falling down. What was chasing those crowds are called pyroclastic dust clouds that only happen from volcanoes or controlled demolitions, explosives. When we heard people saying as soon as they went to the site in the Pentagon, one of the people said, "You never forget the smell of cordite," and the smell of cordite was everywhere, not jet fuel. If you look at the plane that fell into Shanksville, and somehow we were told this plane managed to take a nosedive into the ground and then bury itself within that very ground. Not only is that cartoonishly hilarious, but it was the very excuse they used on why we couldn't see the plane. One of the most profound moments that really hit me was to see that none of those 19 names were ever on the flight manifest. A flight manifest is a very hard thing to fake. You think the government would have just simply made one for them, put out a fake manifest. But they were so sloppy, they sent in the real one. So that's pretty hard to say that you let 19 people on planes with no ticket. That doesn't make a damn lick of sense. So I wanted to take the time to be able to say that we won't forget and I won't forgive. As I stated before, 22 people a day at that time were killing themselves. Like 22 people a day were dying of suicide, my friends included. But to lose 1 million of your own, I couldn't imagine. We live in a country where we have around 30 million people. And the waves of cancer that will continue to come by simply because they had insider trading and more put options were placed onto American Airlines, and it was highly suspicious to the SEC, which guess what? That got hit by the plane. And the money that was being searched for was $2 trillion that went missing. And the very companies like Lockheed Martin that were supposed to be identifying these things were the very places that were hit, not just at the trade centers, but also at the very Pentagon, which had been freshly installed and extra fucking armed. So that way, it was damn near fucking plane proof because it had literally Kevlar netting to stop from shrapnel. The holes that they placed, they originally only said there was one exit hole, and then they had to change the map of it. 9/11 has had more mistakes, sloppy reporting, and obvious holes in their narrative. You might as well call it a fishnet, because nobody can predict a global collapse of a building due to fire, which has never happened in the history of physics. But it happened 3 times on one day. There are no coincidences like that. When you see something the first time, it's an incident. When you see it twice, it's a pattern. But when you see it more than 3 times, it's a program. That's a quote from Norman Mineta, the only man that has never changed his story from the day of 9/11, saying to this day that he was in the actual room when the vice president had said, "Of course, the order still stands. Have you heard anything to the contrary?" All right. So, thank you if you watched this, and please go check out A&E for 9/11 Truth. Go ahead and check out We Are Change. Check out whatever you can to get fully informed on what actually happened that day. For some of you, it's going to be terrifying, and for others, it's going to be a rabbit hole like you've never felt before. It's going to make you angry. It's going to make you depressed. But the truth has to be dealt with. And we're never going to deal with it at this rate. That's my time. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you learned something. Check out A&E for 9/11 Truth. Look up guys like Richard Gage, David Chandler, anybody, Dr. Stephen Jones, who actually was a college professor that was doing the studies on the nanothermite. And his tests were being paid for by the very college that told him he couldn't work for him, but he could still use the labs. So they wanted him to continue that research. They pulled him because they were giving an award to their other alumni, Dick Cheney. True story. And the woman that was in the Pentagon that survived and said there was no jet fuel and her feet were perfectly fine was April Gallup. And Barbara Ondiger has her full testimony. And when they tried to bring it up, somehow the very judge that not only threw it away and called it frivolous, but was actually a second cousin to George Bush. History is often stranger than fiction. Have a good one.